Okay, so you sent over some really interesting pieces about the Canadian used car market. It seems like a lot of people are having a tough time selling their cars right now.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenging picture.
So for this deep dive, we really wanted to get into why. Why is it suddenly so hard for Canadians to sell their cars? And specifically, this whole idea of being underwater.
Right, negative equity, where the
Yeah.
car's just worth less than what you still owe on the loan.
Exactly. And the data you shared, well, it shows a huge jump in this. It's pretty startling, actually.
It really is a massive shift. Looking at that Clutch.ca data you mentioned, in the first quarter of this year, it was over 3 times more people underwater compared to last year.
3 times. Wow.
Yeah, like 23.5% compared to just 7.2% back in early 2024. It just begs the question, doesn't it? Why can't people even afford to sell their car?
It sounds so backwards, you know? And Dan Park, the CEO over at Clutch, he basically points the finger at the pandemic, right? And all those supply chain headaches that followed.
That's his take, yeah. It's a sort of a hangover from that whole period.
Okay, so let's unpack that a bit. How did the production shutdowns back then lead to this problem now with negative equity?
Well, it was, classic supply and demand, really.
Yeah.
The pandemic hit, car factories slowed down or stopped globally,
Right.
fewer new cars being made.
Right.
But at the same time, people wanted personal cars more, maybe less public transit use, that kind of thing.
Okay, so demand stayed strong or even grew while supply just tanked.
Exactly. And when you have scarce new cars, prices go up. But it wasn't just new cars, it pulled used car prices way up too.
Yeah, those Auto Trader numbers you sent really show that. I mean, new cars went from what, average $45,000 in early 2021
Around $45,400, yeah.
and peaked at nearly $68,000 by late 2023.
$67,800 in Q3 23. And used cars saw a similar jump from about $27,100 up to $39,100 in that same time.
So people are paying top dollar, sometimes way over asking just to get wheels.
Precisely. And now, here's the rub for today's problem. Those cars bought at inflated prices. They're hitting the used market now.
And the market's cooled off.
Well, the values are correcting, let's say. They're depreciating back towards more normal levels. But if you bought at the peak,
Your loan balance hasn't dropped as fast as the car's value.
you got it. The
Yeah.
value drops below what you owe. That rapid price increase was, kind of artificial, driven by unique circumstances. It couldn't last.
So someone tries to sell that car they bought in, say, late 2022. They think, okay, I'll pay off the loan, maybe have a little left.
That's the expectation, usually.
But then they get an offer maybe from Clutch or somewhere else based on today's actual market value.
And it's less than the loan payoff amount.
Ouch. So instead of getting cash, you find out you have to pay the bank just to get rid of the car. That's got to be a shock.
A huge shock. And the data really bears that out. You look at how many people just walk away from a sale once they see the numbers.
Right. You mentioned that figure jump, too.
Dramatically. In Q1 this year, 86% of sellers who found out they had negative equity decided not to sell.
86% compared to what, last year?
Last year, same period, it was 58%. Still high, but much lower.
So it's not just more people underwater, but the amount they're underwater by is maybe getting bigger, making them more likely to just stop the sale.
That seems to be exactly what's happening. Which leads us to the actual dollar amounts.
Yeah, how much are we talking here?
The average negative equity, according to Clutch's data again, shot up 52% in just 1 year.
52%.
Yeah, it hit an average of $7,710 in Q1 this year. A year ago, it was about $5,050.
Wow, nearly $8,000 underwater on average. That's not pocket change.
Not at all.
And
It turns what should be an asset into a real financial liability.
Dan Park made another good point, didn't he? About people not really knowing their car's value.
Yeah, it's interesting. He said, homeowners often keep a close eye on their property value, but car owners, less so, even though it's often their second biggest asset.
Right, so they might not even realize they're underwater until they try to sell.
And then they're faced with needing, on average, over $7,000 cash just to make the sale happen. As Park put it, not many people have $7,000 of cash sitting around to sell their car.
No kidding, so you're stuck. Maybe your family grew, you need an SUV, or you want something more fuel efficient, but you literally can't afford to sell the car you have.
It's a real trap. And it tells you something when Clutch actually sets up partnerships with lenders.
Oh, right. To offer loans specifically to cover negative equity.
Yeah, loans up to $15,000 apparently. So people are borrowing more money just to get out from under their existing car loan.
Taking on new debt to deal with old debt, that's rough.
And if you zoom out, you can see this as a ripple effect from all that broad price inflation we saw starting in 2020, right?
Yeah.
Cars were just one part of it.
True. And prices haven't exactly snapped back, have they? Even with some cooling, those Auto Trader numbers for Q4 2024.
Still way up from early 2021. New cars still 43% higher. Used cars 27% higher by the end of last year.
Considerably higher. And now there's talk of potential U.S. tariffs adding more pressure on vehicles, steel, aluminum.
Yeah, that introduces another layer of uncertainty for future pricing. It makes planning very difficult for buyers, sellers, and the industry.
It really does. And you also mentioned something about recent price moves being unusual.
That was Barris Akurek from Auto Trader. He noted that used car prices actually ticked up slightly in March this year, by about 0.3%.
Okay. Why is that weird?
Well, March is typically when prices fall a bit due to depreciation. The year before, they fell 2.1% in March. So a small increase is, as he put it, unseasonal.
Hmm. Suggests maybe the market isn't settling down quite as expected.
It could suggest that, or just continued volatility, and we're even seeing some Canadian automakers pausing production lines because of all this market uncertainty.
Right. So it all loops back to that crazy concept Dan Park mentioned.
Yeah, the idea that you just can't afford to sell your car, it flips the whole script on ownership.
Okay, so let's just quickly recap the key things from the sources then. We had the pandemic, the supply chain mess.
Which led to massively inflated prices for both new and used cars for a couple of years.
Then, as things normalize, the values of those cars bought at the peak start to fall faster than the loan balances.
Creating this negative equity situation, this underwater problem for way more people than before.
And the amount of that negative equity is also significantly higher now, making it a real barrier to selling.
Right, those key figures.
Yeah.
Over 3 times as many people underwater compared to last year. That's the 23.5% figure. And the average amount owed jumping 52% to nearly $8,000.
It really paints a picture of the financial strain consumers are under. And it makes understanding these sort of market dynamics pretty crucial right now.
Definitely. And it leaves you with a broader thought, doesn't it? You know, a car is usually someone's second biggest asset.
Yeah.
So what does it really signal about the wider economy when selling that asset actually costs you money? What other sort of unexpected fallouts might we see from all this price volatility we've lived through?
That is definitely something to chew on. What are the other shoes waiting to drop from those wild price swings? A good question to keep in mind.